Ik heb een vlootje. Die heb ik nog van gisteren in de zak.
Dan moet je even een links-rechts in die tafel steken, hoe je 1, 2, weet ik veel. Okay.
Yo, there's a lot of wiring.
Yes, I know. You can just put it over there.
Yeah, I'll put it here for now.
Yeah.
So long it's on the screen. So I need to do something, right? Before I actually start, I'm gonna do this. Because I feel, I don't mind, like I don't think my feet are smelly. In any case, if they are, please wear a mask or anything of that nature. So the first question that we all have, right, is like, where does it all start? You know, because I feel like each and everything in life, whatever it may be, everything has a stage, everything has inception, everything has a, you know, how it grows apart and where it goes. And I think part of the question I've been asking myself, and the question that I believe each of us have at the end of the day, just about with life, is this interesting question of who am I as an individual, right? Because we all put up our armor, you know, in terms of whether it be our ethnicity, our race, where we were raised, the countries we were born in, and all these different things then make up who we are supposedly are. Because how you identify yourself as an individual is more or less predicated by the environment in which you find yourself in. That means what people do in a particular place, country, culture, or whatever religion may be, that becomes a custom of then who that you are. So then popping as a concept, and probably also as something that I think all of us pretty much are wondering, what does popping mean? So I come from the hood in Pumekasi. It's called Mamelodi, the hood township. You know, it's more like a place that is not really close to the city center, but just an outskirt of the city center. So we use this word a lot to say one day nizopopa. So it's kind of an abbreviation of the full word popping. Much like the same way that what popcorns do, you know, for those of you watching movies, you know, you eat popcorns, I think, in one way or the other. And so we use this phrase as a way of inspiring one another, and maybe as a way of motivating one another to say, no, one day, just like how popcorns, you put them all once in a pot, but they don't all really pop at the same time. You know, some will be faster, some will take a bit of time. And so hence, even the concept that we had was popping. So for the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, I want us to talk about these stories. What are the stories that pop? And what are the stories that don't pop? What makes certain stories, certain individuals, and certain group of people to be different from others? What sets them apart? Is it because of when they were born, where they were born, who raised them, what they eat maybe? Is there a special ingredient that we all maybe are missing, a specific recipe that make you as an individual to pop? So when I started doing what I'm doing today, I was 14 years old. So that's like, I think, 8 years back. And so I did my first speech at the school assembly. The title of my speech was, I think it was Mother's Day. So in South Africa on the 9th of May, I think we have Mother's Day, so that's a holiday. And I remember walking from, you know, the school crowd, standing up at the assembly. I was this short. And I got up there and I started saying, you know, mothers are very important, with a very tiny voice. But what was fascinating was that all the learners in my school, everybody was quiet and listening to this kid. Then, but because I was so young, I couldn't really see any of it in terms of, but you know, I just went to the assembly, gave a speech, and then that was that. And then we had a competition, I think, in the same year, where we took all the learners from different grades, put them in one room. So they all did prepared speeches, and then there was supposed to be one winner. So I was doing grade 9. I don't know what's that is called in Europe, but it's like, you know, the second year of your whatever, high school, whatever you guys call it this side. So competition went by and I came out second place. So the learner that took first place was in matric. So matric is like the highest level of your high school or college life, so to speak. So obviously maybe she had better English than me. I mean, I was just fresh in high school. I don't think I was gonna beat her in that sense. But that's where things start. But now the paradox of all of this is that, so I would be at school and be this learner who can stand before an audience and like present speeches. But that's not all of it, you know? And I feel while I could stand there and do what I do, there was still this young kid who had to go home and face a particular situation in his life. For the majority of us, especially in the African context and maybe even in South Africa, majority of kids can actually do the numbers. I think 60% of young kids today are actually raised by single parents, mostly mothers. So for the majority of us, we don't really know our biological fathers, and that's kind of the dilemma and the situation that we have. But that's a story I'll probably touch on as we go. And I would constantly have this question and wonder. For instance, when I go to visit my friends, like where they stay, they would have like your 4 rooms, or like your government house, or like bigger rooms than that. Then we stayed in what I could call, you guys have like a fancy word for it, you call it tiny houses, but with ours it's really, really different. We call it a shed, because you literally take old material and then you kind of make a house out of that, and that's where you stay. And so I would always ask myself, but why are these kids really living in such big houses? I mean, their own bedrooms was big enough to take my whole family in. And then I'll constantly wonder, is it like, are they rich? You know, are they well off? What really makes these kids to be so different from me? And then that's where I also had now the questions of my own identity in terms of, so where do I come from? And why am I finding myself in this situation where I have to succumb to these conditions? Why is that? Is it because of something that I did, what my parents did? And I feel we all have these moments in our life where we ask ourselves, I don't know what you guys believe in, whatever faith that you may have, but there is a sense of surely someone is responsible for this. I don't know who. You call it God, you call it the universe, you call it energy, whatever you call it, but that thing somewhere up there, we all go to that place. And I would also ask myself those particular questions. And it was then during those moments where I look at myself and I look at where I am at the time, and I went through what typically is now inferred to as low self-esteem, right? So what would happen is that while I could shine in my speaking and be this kid that everybody's so surprised about and everybody's so shocked, I'd still go back home and be the same kid who actually doesn't know who his father is and who doesn't know actually where his real origins come from. You know, because each of us are trying eventually in one or the other to have a sense of identity that we can be proud of, that we can hold and be like, man, this is who I am. But for me, it was those long sleepless nights where I felt like I lived under a shadow of a man that I had not known. But wherever I go and wherever that I am, this guy is following me. And I feel in one or the other, we all have that kind of shadow in our lives. We all have certain things, behaviors, drives that we all ask ourselves, but where does it come from? Why do I constantly have to fight and deal and be in a tug of war with the other self of me that I actually do not know where it actually comes from? And so that was me at that age, 15, 16, going through a particular phase in my life where I would be referred to as Utaki or Myaman. So that's words to use or name calling in a sense of just referring to someone's skins and how they come about. Now what's interesting is that this is happening in my own community of black people. This is not, you know, racial thing, whatever the case is, just so we're clear on that front. But it's really now a big problem where even in these little places where we should supposedly be safe, we still don't feel much welcome. Now those were the same words that every time I go to bed, I ask myself, but is it my fault then that I came out the way that I am? Could I have done something about it? Could I have, in any case, by any means, influenced my DNA? Maybe what Charles Darwin did? I don't know. Maybe I could have tried a bit of that, but I wasn't even born when Charles Darwin was doing his thing. But all of that came to this. It was during my December holidays, 2015, I think. Of which then, usually when you're a kid, it's holidays, you want to go to the movies, have a good time. And I had sort of really thought that one day in my life, I'm going to be the next big player. So I personally am a very, very an ardent lover, I think, of a player named Cristiano Ronaldo from Portugal. And the reason for that is I feel he, for me, personifies what it means to work hard, be disciplined, and be consistent in what you do. Of course, he's still human. Of course, not long ago he was banned and was not supposed to train and all of that. I guess even great players go through those moments. But I really thought I would be that guy as well. So now I had a good short span career of soccer where it became an outlet for me to escape the chaos, the tiny house, shack in my context, that I was living in. And so during that time I wrote this book called The Young, Black and Powerful. And pretty much why I am even wearing this t-shirt today, as you can see, it's called The Young, Black and Powerful. And so for me it's more of a symbol, I think, of where I come from and a symbol of where I'm also going. Because in having to write this, much of the thoughts that I had were already surrounding this question of who am I? Because I wanted to understand exactly what makes my life or what doesn't make my life, for that matter. And in this time I was addressing issues such as having to grow up in a place where you're in poverty, you're raised by a single mom who endeavors her life as a domestic worker, and that's what she had to use to sustain us. And not only this, all the struggles sort of made a collective reality that I would never become anything in life. How does a guy like me, born in a situation like that, coming from a community that honestly at the time does not, let's say, encourage hope, believing in yourself, find your dreams, those things are not things you just wake up and you find them just like that. And so moreover, I later came to realize that within me lay this deep buried anger towards my absent father. I felt that much of the struggles we had could have been much bearable had he played his role, had he been around. But as luck and fate would have it, I found an escape from the chaos I was engulfed in through public speaking, and it became a vehicle that helped me to cope with my chaotic world. So the question is, what is your pain? And how are these struggles and how are these vulnerabilities, these trials that you experience eventually become your jewels of inspiration? I think if a kid at that age can actually take all of that, compile it, whether it be a book, surely there's something that you sitting here with all that you've experienced in your life, you can also put together. Moving right along. So life as we know it, and perhaps as it goes as well, it is a lonely journey, I think, for the majority of us. So this was taken at one event I was doing in South Africa. It was actually in my community with a very big audience. I think I do have an image of that as well. And so my journey has been mostly about that. Having to take what I would say are humble beginnings. Having to take what I would say are places of oblivion, or places where you will really need a light at the end of the tunnel, because if there really isn't any light, then I don't know how you would escape that kind of environment. But so even for you sitting here and for those of you listening there, the journey that we all walk only makes sense to those who are bearing it. And hence they do say you have to put yourself in someone's shoes to really understand what they are feeling. And hence I'm wearing no shoes at this particular moment, because my job primarily is to put myself in everybody's shoes and be in a position where it's like, with this question that we all face, and with this question that we all wonder, who am I? It's a question that you guys need to keep thinking about, because we will revisit this. So, what does all of this come down to at the end of the day? I'll share a bit of what I would say someone might look at and be like, there we go. now it's time for you to brag. It's time for you to show off. Nope. It's time for results now. Because then, what is a story if the story in which the hero himself finds yourself in a plot or a situation where you can't escape, or a situation where you need to find a way to make a way, so to speak. We all love heroes that win, but sometimes the heroes don't really win, and I'm quite very early in my hero's journey. So I launched that book in the same year I was doing my matric, which is your final year of college, again. And when that book came out, I did it at a community wall. Actually, the same community wall where that picture is also taken over there. That's the same community wall, interesting enough, where all this magic happened. When this book came out, it sold 500 copies in the same year. I was still in a school uniform. Unfortunately, we don't have those pictures here. And I come from a township where the stereotype and the stigma, hence I have to call it that because it's not the truth. We say black people don't read. Now, with that kind of stereotype, and then you are in a situation where, for instance, you write a book, you publish a book, you want to sell a book, who are you selling to? Because no one reads, no one writes. And at the time when I was writing, I'm really proud to say, after my journey, there's been so many young people who've went about to write their own books and publish their own journey. But it all starts there, with this kid who believed in himself to say, look, as much as I've got this crisis about who am I, my identity and all of that, surely I can become something. Surely I can make something of it. And that's what I feel the book in itself, because even when I was doing radio interviews, all the big platforms in South Africa, that's what the journey was about. The symbol of hope and the story of hope, to say, look, you are young, black, and you are powerful. Now remember, these were words that made me not sleep at night. But now these are the words that actually took me from Mamelodi to the Bali Summit. But actually before this, I have to share this again because it's part of what makes the story very interesting. So on my way to Bali, this was my first trip out of the country, pretty much, and first time in a flight, everything first time. But what happens, maybe God, the universe, whatever we will call it for tonight, I was then upgraded to business class. How many of you have been to business class? If you've been there, you know how that experience is.
Emirates business class.
Emirates, yes, we have to mention that, right? So when I was writing that book, Young, Black and Powerful, so we had like one bed over there, then I had the best spot. Guess where I was sleeping? Right on the floor. Yep, and that's where that book came from. Same book that got me to fly business class. I think for those of you who are here, we'll make this available for you guys to listen to the story and what happened to it, and that's pretty much where I met Eno, as he made the story during the introduction as well. But all of that was not going to be possible if there wasn't a bit of sacrifice, a bit of pain, a bit of struggle. Because how do you move from a place where there's literally nothing to a place where you've got literally a nice tiny house again with your own flat TV, you can eat 30 times as much as you want, free of charge. Though I must say, when I took my flight from South Africa, it was a connecting flight to Dubai. So what happened was, from South Africa to Dubai, I think it's like 4 hours, 5 hours. So I actually didn't eat because my fear was my bank account was on 0. So I'm like, so they say, do you want to have some food? I was like, no, thank you. I did not want to eat anything because I'm like, how am I going to pay for this? Until we got to Dubai, so one lady that was sitting next to me, she's like, are you sure you don't want to eat anything? I'm like, I'd love to, but I really don't have the money. She's like, bro, you're sitting in business class, man. Who pays when they sit there? It's one of the lessons. Now I eat. Every time I travel, I'm like, when is food coming? I can't wait for that part because I didn't know it's all part of the experience. And then, so going to Bali Summit, I also got to meet so many numerous beautiful people out there. And one of them was actually a very beautiful friend of mine. She actually gave birth to a baby boy in the 1st of October, somewhere there. Her name is Hanifa. And so part of the experience that her and I had, we actually even have a clip on my Instagram, was then to talk about going back to the question of what makes an individual who they are. So for instance, she comes from the Muslim community and I come from the Christian background. So typically and generally in everybody's eyes, it is frowned upon for her and I to do what we did there. But the question is, who makes these rules? Who really sets the parameters in which you and I can engage in however way that we engage in? Who really says, look, because you are this and because I'm that, let's draw a line, you're going to stand over there, we're going to stand over there. Now, unfortunately, now the society that we live in, these walls are invisible. So you only see them really if you pay attention to it. But that's what her and I actually spoke about, to then say, look, the young people of now and the young people of today, we want to explore the world. We want to travel. And what we found interesting enough was to say, at the end of the day, the values in which Christians hold are the same values that they hold. So why should I look at you and think you are different from me, or the other way around? Because is it rather not a way in which our environment and our context then shapes us to believe that's all that it is? So the question is, what barriers are currently standing in the way for you to connect with someone that you have not connected? Because at the end of the day, we are all human beings. We are all in one story, because we all have a start and we all have an end, and we both know where we're all gonna end. So why should we spend the next few minutes, you and I, arguing about who is that, who is not that? Because are then those the stories that we wanna tell, the stories that we want them to make us and to tell for the next generations? I don't think those are the stories that pop. The real stories that pop are those ones right over there. The next part of this experience would now touch on a bit and maybe introduce you guys a bit to what I would call my world. So during COVID, I did a whole lot of what I could call journaling in that sense. It would have been nice if I could read you one of my journals, but maybe if we find time, I'll actually do that. But this whole experience for me was about now looking at what is next after having done all of this. I kind of find myself in a situation where I had achieved, especially based where I'm coming from and how my story is made up, I had achieved what one could call the ultimate success. Because you've written a book at a young age, your book has been bought by the Department of Education, you've traveled internationally, you've been to radio stations, you've done everything that one can call success. So then I wondered to myself, why don't I feel the success that I should be having? Why is it I still feel a bit empty? Why is it that even though I would say I had addressed each and everything that I felt was standing in my way, I should be different right now? It kind of came across to say my talent actually grew bigger than myself, in such a way that I thought if I can be that great, then I don't have to deal with this guy, the same kid who still struggled with his identity, the same kid who still wondered who his father is, the same kid who still wondered if this that he's done, does it lead to anything? So in other words, performance or achieving certain results is not a substitute to dealing with yourself. Because each of us, do we have particular pinpoints in our life? Whatever they may come from. Could be because of where you were raised, who raised you, where you were born. All these conditions become a part of your pain. So for the majority of time, what I've been having to do was to do something that I could call integrating the parts of myself that I do not so much love and like, but also understanding that without this vulnerability, I cannot be that guy anymore. Because often what we all want is to come across as the gold, the jewel, the perfectly made everything. Hence, we all love buying expensive things because they give us a sense of we are just as great. But the truth and honest is that hard work, unfortunately, comes from within. And the question is, where do you offload your thoughts? Mine is journaling. Yours could be music. Yours could be cooking, particularly, or however else that you see it. So now, I would like us maybe to take a mini 2 minutes break, get some tea, clap hands if you'd like to. Come back with second round.
Nou, ik was er vanochtend om 5 uur.
I worked that already from day one. Yes,
Yes.
that's what I hear.
Welcome back. I hope everybody's feeling well. So I think we'll just push for the next 10, 15 minutes, and then we should be on our way. So the second part of this then experience is to kind of now take you guys through the process of all these big things, you know, that we spoke about before the break. How do they all come about? So one of the biggest challenges that we have, particularly in Africa, and if you're an entrepreneur who comes from, you know, those conditions, is often one of two things. It's either you have the lack of opportunities or the lack of resources, because then you find that you do have a good idea that you have thought about and that you conceptualized and that you're saying, okay, this is a problem I've identified and this is how I want to solve this problem. But then you find that you do not have the necessary resources. That could be either funding, or that could be, you know, knowing the right people, or whatever other reason that actually stand in the way for you to actually get that done. But I would take a bit of a tangent and also say that it is very hard in the African context, and especially if you're an entrepreneur, to actually build something from scratch. Unfortunately, we come from a place where we do not have economical strength, or rather economics in such a way that you can trace to say from my grandfather to my father and all the generational pathway. We don't have that, unfortunately, because we're mostly raised by parents, unfortunately, who could only be garden boy, farmer boy, kitchen girl. Those are the only available, let's say, jobs or even careers that our parents were in a way conditioned to. And so growing up in that condition, even if you really want to make it big, the biggest question you have for yourself is, but where do I go? Even if I wanted to really take my idea from where it is and take it to the next level, because we do not have that kind of advantage, right? Where you could just say, I know Uncle Bob, he works at this firm, let me call Uncle Bob and then he helps me out. We don't have a hotline for that kind of thing. And so that's part of what you and I today will get to experience. Then about what are then some of the other stories that have managed to pop, even in light of those particular conditions, and the role that you can play in actually helping some of them come alive. It was also part of what, you know, for instance, Peter was with us even when we did the Grace Masterclass, and yesterday's event, the Monday one, and all of that. These are part, for me, the stories that pop, but they need you and I to play a role in terms of making them come alive. So a funny story was when I had to then write my first book, so everything was written in pen and paper. Literally, I did not have access to a PC or laptop or anything of that nature. So when I then went to school, when schools reopened, I went to my teacher, who then became my mentor as well. So he was like, what were you doing during your holidays? I was like, I've just been writing down all my speeches, because the first book is more or less a compilation of the speeches that I gave, but then we obviously added more to that. So he says to me, you've written a book. I'm like, don't joke like that. There's no way I can write a book. I'm still in high school. People who write books must be like 50 years and plus. I don't have that kind of experience. What am I going to tell people? It's like, nah, man, you're worrying about things that actually do not matter. So what would happen was, for the greater part of 2016, first I had to learn what is Microsoft Word, because I did not even have the basics of Microsoft, let alone even using a PC. So there I was typing my first book, and I remember one time I was using, so we have like community outreach and programs where you go for like after school learning and tutorials. So I used one of the PCs there to type a full chapter, chapter 2 of that book. So, but I'm tired, I'm coming back from school, it's been a long day, I type. I leave the PC just as it is, I go to school, go back to the same place, my work is gone. Then I was like, why am I even doing this? what book am I even writing? Because those are the questions that immediately pop in your head. It's like, okay, let's forget about this, right? But in having to do that, I then had to ask myself, because I had to remember the whole chapter, like everything that I'd written down, which is one of the things why I even did history studies, like in furthering my studies, I did history, because that actually tested me to memorize and capitalize thoughts, and hence I can remember conversation that happened long time ago, you know. And so the point of all of this was, what I had to do was to build a brand from scratch. There was no money, there was no Uncle Bob, there was no other thing other than having to use my own resources. Fortunately, I can't really say a platform called Facebook played a big role. So what then I did to build my brand in terms of me even having to now reach opportunities where I could travel, I did the basics of things. So every time I would do a talk, maybe I go to a school, I speak in an assembly, take a picture of that, put it on my Facebook. Hey guys, just did a talk at this excellent school. People comment, how that's amazing. Can you please come to my school? Now, this is mad. So what you do is you do a free show in order to get people to see you, and then when they call, you can now say, oh, by the way, this is how much I'm worth. So for the 3 years of my high school, that's what I had been doing. I put my work for free, and then I know that when you call me, you then need to book me. So that went as far as me having a radio show. Having been to varsity, did radio, so I remember walking to the station, and the lady at the reception says to me, so, do you have an appointment? I said, yes. And I was lying, I did not have an appointment. I don't know who the manager is. It's like, okay, well, the manager is currently busy. Can you wait like 5 minutes? I'm like, for sure. Then I went to the manager, so he says, what's your name? Like, I'm Howard. They told me you have an appointment. I said, yeah, I tried calling you guys. No one picks up. I mean, it's a story that anyone buys. You know, I said, I tried calling, no one picks up. So it's like, okay, fine, I have 5 minutes. What do you want to say? I'm like, look, I'm coming from the township, and I've written a book, and I feel like there's so many young people who can benefit from my story, and I don't see why you would not give me the opportunity, because practically I'm a product of this township, so why not give me a platform? So by virtue of that, the guy says, okay, when do you want to start? I said, even tomorrow. Then from there, I had my first ever radio show. So what I did with my show, it was also like a form of marketing. So I'd then bring guests who would come into my show, would record the podcast, which are actually available for those of you who want to listen to my previous shows. I'll share that with you. And from there, what I was able to do was to establish myself, to say, here's a young kid, little over 18, who's written a book, he's got a radio show, he's traveling, he's doing all these things. And that's how I built my brand, in such a level where I could now meet, you know, the likes of Enos and others who have helped me to then take what I built from South Africa to the world. So this is now for me an encouragement to then say, there's so many other young people as well who will probably just have as great ideas, as great talent, but the question is, how do you take all of that and actually put it together? And so by virtue of that, I've then also now really had the privilege to even work with national institutions in the country, for instance, the National School of Government, where we actually train leaders before they take positions in any political country. So I've only been able to do this by virtue of knowing, one, my worth, my value, and what is it that I really want to provide. But the constant question you always have as an individual, especially in my life, I don't have a clear path to then say, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then voila, I'm done with my life. So it's the constant paranoia. It's exciting, it's risky, because there's no certainty, but at the same time, there's so much freedom in having to apply yourself in something that you're passionate about, in something that you believe in. But the question is, are you willing, as Malcolm Gladwell says, to put in the 10,000 hours? Because there were so many moments where, and this is part of the big lesson I had to learn for myself, where you are invited to an event and you don't even know where to get there. I call my friend, hey man, can you borrow me money for taxi? And then the friend pays you the money, you go to the event, maybe you sell 2 books, which are just enough to cover your fare going back home. The friend calls, hey man, I need my money back. I'm gonna call the other friend, hey friend, borrow me money to pay this guy. Until you know it, it's a full circle of debts, but in any case, you are working toward something. But the issue I'm raising here is the issue of capital. That a lot of the times we do have the initiative, we do take the risk, but we don't have then the opportunity to then say, how can I build this thing for scale. How can I really monetize what I'm doing and really put it out there? And so now I'm about to share with you guys a couple of stories about individuals that you and I might already be familiar with. There's a girl, especially if you're really young and like listening to this. Her name is Majimbo. She's I think from Kenya. So she started doing, there's a platform called TikTok. So she started documenting her journey on TikTok, just about where she comes from, her struggles, and all of that. Today I can tell you she's doing covers in Paris, she's traveling the world, she's doing everything possibly that a young girl from Africa could possibly imagine, simply because of using one medium of TikTok. That's one story that is also popping. There's a guy, he's now got an afro, interesting enough, his name is Trevor Noah, he's currently doing the Daily Show. He was born in South Africa, Soweto, famous township. He's a mixed breed of two parents, Xhosa mom, Switzerland's dad. So all his life, he's been more or less a mixed breed, you know, and he's constantly been asking himself, but where do I belong in the world? And actually when you listen to Trevor, his story and his journey, you get to appreciate how that condition has made him who he is. And not only that, the guy is really good at what he does. But what separates Trevor from your normal comedian is the fact that he's got a story that most of us can relate to. Regardless of whether you're a mixed child or whatever the case is, even when you read Born a Crime, for those of you who've read Born a Crime, you would actually appreciate how that comes about. So there's now an interesting guy, and I'll finally put my shoes back for a particular reason. So his name is Theo Baloyi, and he's the founder of this shoe called Batu. So that's also like another way of saying people. Ubuntu, Batu literally represents that. And what he says though in his slogan is walk your journey. And part of the reason why I'm so connected to the shoe, I'm not promoting it, I'm really just loving it, although I should call him for a partnership. This is so much marketing for the guy, you know. But the idea with walk your journey, this is the first ever local shoe brand to ever be established in South Africa. So he also comes from Alex, and from there he was saying, look, I've got a good job and everything else, but I want to do something more. So he then created the first shoe, a sneaker brand, and I think you guys might probably see that it is quite good and very comfortable as well. Privileges of doing one-man show is that I can put on my shoes and put them off and no one can complain because it's my show, unless you want to walk out. But yeah, the point then of sharing these stories and then probably this journeys as well is to say there are so many other popping individuals. And I can proudly say you are looking at one of them. Because a lot of other things that will happen post the show is we're going to show you guys this image, what that is about and what goes into there, the 1 million hypos and many other things that we are planning. And so for me now, and for those of you listening virtually or so, my goal is really simple, and it is one of inspiring as many young people as I can possibly reach through the spoken word and through the written word. And it is through these initiatives that I believe if we can create more platforms in which young people can find themselves in spaces where they can dream, in spaces where they can understand what their talent is, understand what is it that they are building towards, then we stand a better chance of actually building, you know, sustainable things. Because in my country, we've got an issue of unemployment, right? Which means we've got a high number of graduates, but the supply in terms of jobs is that low. So now you've got an influx of graduates, but the job demand is really that low. And so how do we solve that? The only way you solve this crisis is that we need to empower the entrepreneurs. Because now the entrepreneurs have got a way in which they can solve problems, and if we empower more entrepreneurs through their business, through their endeavors, then we've got a better chance of saying, now you've went to varsity, you've got all the skills, come and then apply all of that in this particular business. But unfortunately, we want to do it the other way around, where we actually want to empower the very same institutions that are failing to meet the demand in which the young people want. And when you're an entrepreneur, you go to a bank and say, hey, this is my business plan, this is what I do. They tell you that, unfortunately, you do not meet requirement. Simply because you are a risk taker, right? But now, if we don't reward the risk takers, then how do we expect the biggest problem to be solved? Because unfortunately, it's only the risk takers. Now, with these popping stories, there are also two other popping stories that I find very interesting, because these are more global stories that we may all know, even though we may not all feel the same connection to them. And one is a guy, for instance, who decided to say, look, I'm done with this keyboard thingy. I want to go virtual, so to speak, with my keyboard. And that's a guy who founded Apple. But the story with Apple as well is for individuals who want to think different, and probably individuals who see themselves differently. Now, we all know what he had to go through in terms of applying himself and what he had to do in terms of just making Apple what it is today. There's also one story, Phil Knight. For those of you who read Shoe Dog, you would know the story about how he's more or less an amateur athlete himself, because he did do a bit of running, but eventually he stopped. So when he created Nike, he also wanted to celebrate such individuals, such pioneers. Hence, you would see most of their adverts are celebrating athletes who actually come from, let's say, harsh conditions, but they've taken all of that and decided, you know what, we're gonna pop. Now, the question is, which of these popping stories and which of these individuals do you also want to see yourself popping with? Because remember, it does not make sense when it starts, but eventually when it gets going, you're like, man, I should have called that guy. Because right there was the right moment and the right opportunity for me to really connect. Because it really goes down to that. And hence I'm so fascinated by the idea of how stories actually make up brands. That the reason why, people, for instance, would choose Harley Davis is not because of the big machine and all of that, but it's the spirit of adventure. It's the spirit of, look at me, who do you think you are when I'm riding this thing? Hence, even people would even do tattoos. And it's so fascinating even to see why, we choose Apple over other brands. Surely it's probably one of the best, but not only because of that, but the story that comes with it. And the same reasons why we choose the brands that we choose to believe in. It's all about that. Because at the end of the day, we are looking for stories that we can connect with. And my story, for the majority of time, has been one of being young, black, and powerful. It's a story that I've shared over numerous times. Even when you go to YouTube and any other place, you would find a whole lot of that. But the challenge I have for you and I is too. With your life and with your story, how do you take all of that and bring it all together? How does it all help you eventually that in moments like these ones, where you're not seeing the light, where you're wondering, why did I make this decision? Where you're wondering, but is any of this ever going to come together? In those dark moments when nothing seems to make sense, as you can see, the image does portray someone who's calm, but also you can see the variety in terms of how this person and this person is two different things. Because now finally, when you step out of your shell, your fears, and everything else that have become a barricade, can finally see the real light, can finally connect with people and converse. And also I must say the guy looks pretty handsome as well, if I say so myself at least. But that's pretty much the essence of it. That at the end of the day, we all want to be here, at the top of the iceberg. But underneath all of that lies even more, I would say, than just rejections, late nights, but it also lies having to deal with yourself. Because the biggest struggle is not with the world. The biggest struggle is with your world. Because our thoughts, our emotions, our feelings, our dreams color their world. It's like a typical thing where someone is like, I tripped over that thing, I'm angry. No. You were angry, then you tripped over that thing, and then the right emotion came out. Just a funny psychological joke. But it's not so funny when it comes to the realities of our lives. The reality of the stories that we are all afraid of. The stories that we do not want to face. And such for me has been that experience for all of you. To take it through a journey of humble beginnings, and through a journey and a story that continues from today onwards. And for me personally, it is my dream to be able to share this with as many people as I can reach in as many countries and do more and more of this. But unfortunately, I also understand I cannot do that alone. I do need people. And I do need people who believe in this vision and in this dream. Because if then the story in itself does not have the people that believe in it, then even I myself am not big enough to carry it. I can only share it, but it is not mine alone. So what role do you want to play in this whole popping experience? It's been a bless. Thank you all. That's also fine. We can go home if there are no questions.
I have a
Even I am
question.
silent.
So I was wondering, from your initial drive from starting as a public speaker, what was the light bulb moment where you thought, I need to put this on pen and paper and make a book out of this? Like, what was that jump?
Yeah. I think it was honestly at a moment where eventually we all have to ask ourselves, how long can this, go on? And I must say, at the time I'm speaking now, reflecting back at a moment where I was pretty much very young and maybe not as conscious as I am right now.
Yeah.
But I would then say, maybe I just decided to own up my story, because I feel like at the end of the day, it is my story, it is my pain. And if I'm not willing to carry it and put it out there, then that will always haunt me and I'll always be afraid of it. But now if I can put it on my t-shirt, whatever you say to me, it's more of a compliment. So I think I then decided, I'll own up this thing, because at the end of the day, it is also what makes me. And I feel for the lot of us, we do not want to, not wanna, this is not America. We do not want to, we do not wanna be in situations where we are vulnerable. I think each of us would do anything to avoid anything that makes us feel real, but we would actually go out to the world and say, I'm authentic, I'm as real as they come. But when it's time for us to really be that vulnerable and start having honest conversations, that's why people put markers on. People want to put protective gear, which is why I think I would encourage even those who are listening that if you go back and play the Letting Go by Eno, I think there's so much connection. Actually, we should have done this one day. Next time we should do that. Because I feel there's so much there already that was said yesterday that I feel already links up to this. But I'd then just say, yes, it is really about, are you willing to accept your vulnerabilities? Because true strength does not come from being strong, in my opinion. True strength actually comes from you having to accept that, look, I've got a flaw here, and I'm in a situation where I don't feel as much comfortable. But if you own up to that, then you have more strength, because then who you are is as authentic as it comes. You don't have to lie, you don't have to put anything else. But often, I'd rather wear my batu, put on a suit and tie, then I say, let's be vulnerable.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Perhaps I should stand next to you, if I may.
Ellen, thoughts?
There's a question or a comment over there from Sergio. I think I got your name correct, bro. Sure.
How do you handle your criticism that you get?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I'd say, well, there's also two ways to look at where criticism comes from, hey? Because one, you've got criticism, and then you've got what I could call projecting. And often I think we confuse the two, because it's much easier to project to someone than it is actually to take a step back and be like, but where does it often come from? So for me, if someone would say something back to me, I firstly want to consider, where is this person, like in life, what's going on with them, what context are they in? Because then that gives me, again, goes back to awareness. The knowing of a person who's in this situation can only say something like that to another human being, so to speak, So I think you would want to ask yourself, is this a criticism, or is this someone projecting something to themselves? For instance, you find someone saying, yeah, you're working so hard, you barely have time to rest, and all of that. And that's a criticism, because this is someone more or less saying you're not taking better care of yourself. But then you might look at that person and be like, but what are you doing? You know, because if you're not doing anything and you're seeing someone doing something, the only thing you can do is throw stones at that person to try and stand in their way. You know, and I think everything, man, goes back to self-awareness, in my opinion, because you don't control what is being said to you, but you control how you respond to it. And that's like where, for me, the real power is at right now, like generally in life, to then say, even if something was to happen, the question is it even in my control? Is it something I should be bothered by, or is it just your own thing? Whereas often, if someone says something to you, the immediate reaction is, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, I should have, whatever the thing is. You know, so self-awareness in that sense plays a very big role in terms of allowing yourself to judge criticism. And if you can take the truth for what it is, then whatever someone says, man, it won't really affect you in any case. But eventually, for me, I feel like the biggest criticism personally is myself. I don't think anyone can critique me better than I do. You can say what you want to say, but those are your thoughts. At the end of the day, I have to deal with the self, and that's where the superpower lies in my opinion, at least. Sure. Going on. Sorry.
What is your big, hairy, audacious goal in life?
Personally?
Yes.
Honestly, this is something that I love. Meeting new people, traveling, connecting with as many people. And I think for me, it's about how many people can I reach with my story. And not only that, how many more other stories can I actually learn from other people as well. You know, so being able to do this for me is really my big, hairy, audacious goals. So I'd say cheers to more theaters, cheers to more books, and you know, cheers to all of that. That's my big, hairy, audacious goal, personally speaking. Yeah. Peter?
I'm France, I know you.
Peter, let's try to change the lights. Come this way, please.
Yes.
There we go.
We're going.
How was the show for you? What stood out? Did you enjoy the show?
I enjoyed the show very much. It's an enormous insight in what you said, and I'm incredibly proud I know you.
Yeah, that's great. So anything else that you want to take home and be like, man, I listened to that kid and...
Oh man, when I listen to you, I want to pop.
Oh, you want to pop? That's a good one. That's a good
I'm
one.
looking my own popcorn now, so
Yeah.
I can pop.
Okay, that's cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Cheers. I can give you coaching lessons,
Yeah.
speaking lessons if you want. Your thoughts on the show?
So, Howard, this is my first time seeing you perform on stage, and I could just see your beautiful stage presence. You're very warm, comfortable, confident, and the stage was made for you, so keep it up.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
what stood out for you? One thing that stood out? Besides my shoe, of course.
Besides the awesome kicks, your story, your background, and your passion and motivation, and all of that put together in an hour was really beautiful to watch and learn.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So you want to come to the next one? If
For
we ever
sure,
do this?
I want to. I'll be there.
Yeah?
I'll be there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Why do you disagree?